Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans all around the world, bonjour, vigates, hola, and mushi mushi, and welcome to another episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, a world famous, world celebrated, uh, almost godlike figure of a comic book writer. You get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. And welcome to a very, very special episode. It's a twin spin festival. Yes, every single person who contributed to this week's episode earned a twin spin. This has never happened before in the history of Ask Chuck Dixon, or dare I say it, the history of the universe. So let's get started with our first lucky twin spinner, Rebecca Charland. What are your opinions on the much maligned self-insert character, or the author just writing their own actual self into the story as a character? Can it be, or has it ever been done well? Is it at least a blemish on what is otherwise a good story? Under what circumstance, if any, do you think it could be a good practice? It's coincidental that this question came up now. I had an extended phone conversation with another writer yesterday. It's very rare that I have a conversation with another writer, and because writers are a suspicious and cowardly lot, and we all fear talking to one another. At least every writer I know does. But in this case, we were talking about how much of ourselves we put into our writing. And I said to this other writer, very, very talented gentleman, I said, I know I put something of myself into my stories, but I'm not aware of it. I'm oblivious to it. And I beg you not to point any of them out. And he promised he would not. So I'm still unaware of what part of me ends up in the stories that I write, because I pride myself on being an invisible hand writer. I want you to read the story. I don't want you to be thinking about who wrote it. I don't want to draw you out of the story at all at any time. And so I remain in the background, your humble narrator, your humble raconteur, just telling you this story. And I want you to be engaged in the story, not engaged with me. Now, this other author said that he realized several books into his writing career that he was unconsciously creating characters too much like himself. I don't think I've ever done that. I don't think I've ever created a character like myself in a story. But he had to make a conscious effort to not do that. He says, he said, he was adverse to writing failures or idiots. All of his characters were smart and capable. He realized he was writing Mary Sue's, and he had to stop because they were all this perfect paragon version of himself. And I'll tell you, there's an example in genre fiction or in literature that I've read where a writer made a sea change like that, and I saw it in his writing, and that's Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton, in his earliest novels, basically his characters were stand-ins for himself, and this elevated, high esteem version of himself. This himself, a perfect Michael Crichton in a perfect world. And his characters seldom knew failure, and never knew failure. They always had the answers. They always were, and he's writing compelling novels and everything else. And his novels are really about plot more than character, so it really didn't matter that his characters were Mary Sue's. But I was reading one of the books, and I think it was Red Sun, and it was the first time I noticed that, not Red Sun Rising. It's the one about warning everybody about the Japanese were going to take over our economy. One of the few predictions that Crichton made about the future that proved to be false. Anyway, in that novel, suddenly we have a character who's a bit of a failure, not necessarily a failure, but he has faults, he has flaws. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't have all the answers. And I kind of wondered, what's that all about? And then I learned later that that novel was written during a particularly bitter divorce Michael Crichton was going through. And I could certainly relate to that. My divorce many, many years ago um, definitely changed my writing, definitely added an edge to it. And I saw that in Crichton's writing. And from that point on, he writes characters who screw up every once in a while. Jurassic Park is a perfect example, both Jurassic Park novels. And so, yeah, that's a thing. Now the self-insert, I find it annoying. I find it distracting. I find it narcissistic. As they say, I'm all for the invisible hand writer. Um, the only time, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, the only time a self-insert worked was Kurt Vonnegut inserted himself briefly into the novel Slaughterhouse-Five, but he did it in such a way that it didn't draw you out of the novel, it drew you more into the novel. It made all the events in the novel seem more, it's a crazy novel. It's a crazy book. I love it. It's wonderful, but it's nuts. But Vonnegut appearing in his own book briefly, however briefly, for a few sentences, just makes it all seem more real, makes it all seem more immediate and weirdly intimate. It's one of those scenes in a book where the author is speaking directly to you, and you really feel like he's speaking directly to you. You don't. Somehow he inserts himself in the book, but keeps the invisible hand going because you don't think about him as a writer. You feel as if you just met him personally, as if he is literally writing this to you, the reader. Jennifer or Henry or whatever your name is. He's writing this to you, and that was different and very well done. Anyway, as I said, everybody earns a twin spin. So here you go, Rebecca. Okay, Rebecca returns with playing off of one of last week's questions about hypothetical DC and Marvel mergers. If, in an impossible alternate reality, you were tasked with developing and writing an ongoing crossover comic book series, as opposed to a one-shot or miniseries starring one character from the Marvel setting, one from DC, forced together as allies, enemies, or some other convoluted relationship, which two characters from the two settings do you think would work best together in an ongoing series? Would you want the story to be incorporated into the continuity of one or both of the settings, or would it work better as a self-contained what-if series? I will leave the continuity questions to all the rest of you. Obviously, you want to mix these two universes in a way that readers would want to see. Number one, that's the whole point of a crossover, or a whole point of what might be this imagined DC Marvel merger, is you want to engage readers, you want to draw new readers in, you want to bring old readers back who have left the fold. And how do you do that and make it successful? Because it's got to be successful. It's not going to work. There's only no reason to do a crossover for artistic reasons, although I get a big creative kick out of doing crossovers, and I do promote crossovers or pitch crossovers that might not be as financially successful, but from an artistic standpoint, would be a lot of fun to write. But let's forget about that. DC and Marvel, you're going to have Spider-Man and Batman. They're going to mix it up. They're going to get involved with each other's cases, fighting crime, opposed at the beginning, uniting at the end. That's the way team ups go. Come on, let's face it. We all want to see it. We all want to see Batman versus Spider-Man, even if it's only for a few panels or a few pages. And their styles both complement and conflict with one another. Spider-Man's more easygoing kind of thing. It's kind of interesting because think about it. Bruce Wayne's a pretty together guy because he's Batman. He's just Batman in a business suit. So he's a pretty together guy all the time, 24/7. Spider-Man, Peter Parker isn't. Peter Parker is not a together guy. In I don't know how he's portrayed now, but the best version of Peter Parker is he's a bit of a screw up. He's a bit unsure of himself. And it's a real transition when he becomes Spider-Man. But Spider-Man is the facade. Spider-Man is the masquerade, whereas Batman is Batman. He's not Bruce Wayne. He's Batman. He's Batman all the time, even when he's Bruce Wayne. So, but Peter Parker makes this transformation into Spider-Man. A personality transformation. Remember back when you were in school, high school, junior high, and you went from class to class? Didn't you reinvent yourself in each class because the makeup of each class was different? You weren't the same person in geometry that you were in English. You presented a different persona. That's what Peter Parker does when he becomes Spider-Man. He becomes the best version of himself. And that kind of contrast be a lot of fun to play with. In addition to the fact that these two have, the most awesome rogues galleries of any comic book characters. There's a lot to play with in both the Spider-Man and the Batman universe. I mean, some characters are just characters and they're in a setting. Then other characters they bring more to the party with them. And both of these characters bring this rich legacy of backstory and ancillary characters and, whatever, events in their past to the mix. Now, the one I would be tempted to write is two villains. I mean, Doctor Doom and Darkseid. Imagine the DC and Marvel universes merged. Well, somebody's going to have to come out on top. And Doctor Doom is not going to be happy if Darkseid is the most powerful guy around. There's going to be conflicts. There's going to be one of these guys is going to have to come out on top. And don't bet against Doom. Never bet against Doom. And I just like the fact that they're both Kirby creations. And wow. I mean, I could sit down tomorrow and plot out 2 years of stuff with these characters. And the thing about it is this shared universe would be crushed between them. They would forget Secret Wars. I mean, this would be epic. This would be huge. This could be the biggest comic book event ever. A extended crossover event between the two companies. It's basically a war between Doom and Darkseid for who is going to rule the planet. Who's going to be the top dog in their universe. And think about it. I mean, it's mind-blowing already. You're probably already thinking of stuff you'd want to see. Okay. And then, of course, I mean, Superman, Hulk. This would be a major conflict in these universes. The two most powerful characters from either side. And this would have to be, I don't know where the Hulk's position is in Marvel Universe right now. Is he the menacing brute, or is he the intellectually functional Bruce Banner Hulk? I don't know. I don't care. I would take it back to Brute Hulk. Kind of replay the events of Death of Superman with a different outcome, obviously. But Mondo Destruction book that would make a fortune if you did this right, if you played this right. And of course, this could play a part in my imagined Doctor Doom Darkseid War event. So there you go. Let's move on to Alan Marebi. Did you ever read Brubaker's Captain America, knowing how much of a fan you are of the character? The one area I didn't like was his handling of the 50s Cap, a character I love and I believe you are a fan of. I heard you had a proposal for him and would love to know if you would share it. Have you ever thought of doing a pastiche hero who fought communists in the 50s? I think I read a little bit of Brubaker's run. Of course, Steve Epting art. My God, gorgeous. Steve was made to draw this kind of material. Of course, he's made to draw any kind of material. I could see Steve excelling in any genre. But it's a classic run. But I've only read a little bit of it. It didn't really grab me. The writing. Sorry, Ed. I like Ed. Nice guy. This didn't grab me. I don't think he caught the essence of the character, and I really didn't like the Winter Soldier. I know a lot of people love it. You're all groaning like, "That was great, Chuck. What are you talking about?" No, I didn't care for it. It was too dark for a Captain America story. Now I realize, I'm in the minority. It was enormously successful. Lots of people loved it, ended up in the movies, blah, 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 blah. But I just, it wasn't my thing. I didn't care for it. Cap of the 50s, he's always gotten run roughshod over because in Marvel continuity, he became an irrelevancy because in current Marvel continuity, current meaning from 1963 onwards, um, Cap's history is rewritten so that Cap is um, knocked out of action in World War II, ends up frozen at the North Pole. You all know the story. So there's this gap in Cap's life from the end of World War II to the beginning of the 60s. So that sort of built into the Marvel universe in the 70s. I forget, I'm going to say Roy Thomas, but maybe it wasn't Roy Thomas, wrote an arc bringing the 1950s Cap, who was a completely different guy, and 1950s Bucky back into continuity. But they were completely different guys, and they were like deluded right wing nutbags, as opposed to heroic right wing nutbags. And it was all an anti-communist kind of thing. The anti-communists, for those who, okay, you had the House on Un-American Activities, you had the Joe McCarthy hearings, the Red Scare, and enough of the writers at Marvel at that time had grown up with memories of that, even if they were as a child. And of course, in public school, we were all taught how terrible the Red Scare was. And why this was is because it was the rise of the anti-communists, what we would later know as liberals in American politics. And they basically poo-pooed the idea that communists were infiltrating our military, our entertainment industry, and everything else. And anyone who claimed that they were, anybody that claimed that they were some kind of crazy who saw communists under the bed, who fantasized about communist invasions, who just were deluding themselves because the people in the Soviet Union were just, they didn't want to take over the world. They're just the nicest people. Let's just leave them alone. While they, grind their heel on Eastern Europe and send missiles to Cuba. So the anti-communists made it, taboo to even talk about communism in anything other than glowing or analytical terms. Despite the fact the American public obviously didn't like communists. JFK, I know I'm going deep in the weeds here, but it's my show. JFK and Richard Nixon both ran in their campaigns about who would be harder on communism. And JFK was a virulent anti-communist as much as Richard Nixon. And JFK's brother Bobby was even more of a virulent anti-communist. The people who write our histories tend to forget that Bobby Kennedy and Richard Nixon worked together to uncover communist infiltration into various institutions in the United States. They were very much aligned in their disgust at the Red Menace. So anyway, into all of this hoo-ha falls this revised version in the 70s of the 50s Cap. And then, of course, it continues on with Ed Brubaker, whose politics were much in line with whoever it was did the 50s Cap. And I remember reading in the 70s the revise of the 50s Cap that he was sort of a puppet, an idiot, a moron, and ultimately a dangerous psychopath because he opposed communism. And I thought, wow, this is ridiculous. And I just stopped reading Captain America. I read part of that story, and I was like, this is idiotic. This person didn't think this through at all. They don't know anything about history because the communist infiltration in the United States and our various institutions was very, very real. Unfortunately, we had a spokesperson, ineffective spokesperson like Joe McCarthy, who kind of, took the wind out of the sails of any effort to remove communists from, government agencies, places like that. I mean, today it's okay to talk about communists in a bad way, but it wasn't back then. Yeah, I didn't like that. And yes, Graham Nolan and I did propose a miniseries about the 50s Cap that would have redeemed him, would have shown that, yeah, he was right. There were filthy Reds everywhere. And so this Cap, basically validate everything that cop was fighting for at the time. So yeah, I did propose that, Graham and I, and of course we were shot down within. We knew we would be, but we had to do it. We had to pitch it just in case we found an editor who was so oblivious they might have greenlit it. It probably would have been one of these the rare series that got canceled as we were as Graham was penciling issue 2. They were, oh my God, look at this! What the hell is this? And just pull the rug out from under us. But anyway, yeah, that almost happened. And would I like to write it now? I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to do an EC type horror story of horror story anthology about communist atrocities in the 20th century. Do full blown horror stories. I even know the hosts that I would have the commissar introducing the story using bad puns. It would be kind of an EC parody, but also show you actual historical retellings of the atrocities of Mao Zedong, Stalin, Pol Pot, Ho Chi Minh, and the rest. So if there's any publishers out there interested in doing that, I'm ready to write. Okay, twin spin, another twin spin. Alan Barebi again. I know you praise often your Nightwing collaborator McDaniel and his manga energetic type art, but I don't hear you discuss Greg Land much. Did you like his art on the book being so different in style? How did it affect sales when he took over? I personally preferred his art because to me, comics are escapist. And a little sexiness never hurt anyone. Plus, he made one of my favorite characters, Clancy, pop. Well, I talk about Mr. McDaniel largely because, he was instrumental in building this comic and in developing this comic. He had the longest run of any artist ever on Nightwing, and he and I worked, shoulder to shoulder, on the same page all the time to, make this comic everything that it came to be. And so obviously I talk about him quite a bit, but nothing against Greg. Greg's a great guy. We did a lot of great work on Birds of Prey. We got to know each other a lot better when we worked at CrossGen. I like Greg and I liked Greg's art. Now, what difference did it make to the book when Greg came on board was I moved away from the more kinetic fight scenes that Scott McDaniel did toward more crime stories. I leaned more into Dick Grayson as a police officer. And also, you're right about Greg's proclivities with drawing females, and I made more female characters. This one on the screen isn't one of them. But so, yeah, I adjust my work to suit the artist I'm working with as much as I can. And I did that with Greg. And, I was very, very happy with Greg and my buddy, Drew Geraci, working on this book together. We'd had so much success with Birds of Prey. It was kind of cool to get the band back together. So yeah, I like Greg's work a lot. And he and I every once in a while talk about a project we would like to do together, create our own project. Very high concept that initially Greg came up with, and I fell in love with the idea. And I won't tell it to you because it's so high concept, it's easy to steal. So, okay. Joshua Ignatowski, when creating new characters for established franchises, as you skillfully did with heroes, villains, and side characters alike during your time on the Bat titles at DC, how does one make said new characters feel like they truly belong in the established franchise as opposed to feeling too fan fiction-y? Well, you want your new characters to serve a purpose in the story. If it's the girlfriend, like Ariana was the girlfriend to Tim Drake and Robin. He was a teenager and he had a girlfriend. He went to school, he had a girlfriend. He had other school chums. Well, you needed to populate that. You needed to create lasting, interesting, engaging characters for that. So it's not fan fiction-y, it's the demand of the story. Stories demand to be populated, just like we needed villains. So, I create Lady Vic and any number of new villains for Nightwing because he needed new villains. Nobody wanted to see Nightwing fighting all of Batman's, second helping villains. They wanted to see, new personalities. It was a new opportunity for Nightwing, new adventures, new villains, new friends, new setting, and I went for it in a big way, creating new villains almost every issue for the entire time I was on the book. And then other characters just sort of grow out of opportunity. In Birds of Prey, I created the Joe Gardner clone as part of or Guy Gardner clone as part of the storyline. It was just a plot thing, but kind of took on a life of its own. And you know, I tried to bring him back as often as possible. He's kind of a forgotten character now, but he served a purpose in the story, and then went on to other things. Obviously we had to create a villain for Nightfall, and when Graham and I created Bane, the idea was in everybody's head that Bane was kind of an evil Doc Savage, and of course, Graham being a huge Doc Savage fan, I think he was a big part of the reason why we created Bane's three henchmen, Bird, Trog, and Zombie. And so they filled a need. And Bane did need a support group. He needed underlings. He needed henchmen. And, but not to make it too fan fiction-y. I'm not real sure what that means, but in any case, I'm going to go with my own definition I have in my head. Not to make it too fan fiction-y, we created a different relationship between Bane and his henchmen in that they were Bane looked upon them more or less as equals. He didn't look at them like, he could just tell them what to do. Like, he's the big boss. He's the big man in charge, and they all look up to him. But he owed each one of these characters a debt, and he was repaying it by bringing them along with him on his hopefully successful crime spree. So they were more than just, guys, thugs that he sent out to do his bidding. They were all very much equals in their gang. And then you have characters like, Tezcatlipoca, which I wanted a feral animal villain to sort of match Green Arrow, Connor Hawke, a character that you'd be able to hunt him as he was hunting the character. And I just like that idea. Plus, this character fit into the global adventure genre that I kind of put Green Arrow into. If you ever read the Green Arrow run that I wrote, you'll see that, it's world spanning. I mean, Connor goes all over the world, him and Eddie Fires, having these different adventures. And to me, the challenge of them was, why are they going on this adventure? What's the reason for it? I mean, what's the draw? And that was the challenge, to come up with a motive for, flying off to China or flying off to Africa or Central America. What was the reason for it? What did it feel organic? Did it feel natural? Because the last thing you want is feathery motives for your characters. So the characters want to go to these places. They have a goal. And that was, you sort of had to create once again characters to populate them. And then I just created characters that I thought were cool. I've come up with the concept for a villain like Steel Jacket. Steel Jacket could fly because his bones were hollow. He was a mutant of some kind. I never really got into it. I don't think I ever got into an origin for Steel Jacket. But he was basically a one gimmick character. But I was fascinated by the idea that once he was out of his exoskeleton armor suit, he was really vulnerable because his bones were hollow. So even a character like Robin could easily take him down. He was more creepy than anything else. And of course, the spoiler, again, like other characters, spoiler, like Guy Gardner's clone, spoiler was created as a plot device and took on a life of her own. I mean, she was created to serve the first story she was in as Cluemaster's daughter, but then readers, you folks just fell in love with her, and we got tons of letters saying when is she going to be back? And so we brought her back when the Robin got his own monthly series. Once again, He's got his own monthly series. I've got to populate it with new characters. He has his own police officers that he interacts with. He has his own friends, and I brought in spoiler returns as a rival masked vigilante, specifically as a Robin supporting character. So the characters, if you're going to introduce characters, there has to be a reason they're there. That they're vital to the storyline, not just somebody you created and had showed up. And isn't most fan fiction porno? So I guess plot doesn't matter. Uh, twin spin. Of course, everybody gets a twin spin today. Okay, Joshua's back with what's your favorite episode of Adam West Batman and why? Yeah, there's a lot of ones I like. There's some Riddler episodes. I like all the Riddler ones, even the John Astin one. And there's a couple of Joker ones I really like. And I like Cliff Robertson as Shame, just for the scene where Batman captures him and says, "You're a sham, Shame, a shame and a sham." I just love that scene. But my favorite episode, most memorable episode, was from the second season. It was a Catwoman episode called Scat Darn Catwoman. And at the end, when Batman captures Catwoman and she's going to go to jail for the umpteenth time, she suggests that she could reform. She could become a good girl, and she could dedicate her life to making Batman happier than he could ever have been, and that they would join up together and fight crime. And Batman says, "Well, what about Robin?" And she says, "Let me think. We'll kill him." And that scene alone makes that my favorite episode. Tochi, why is it that the vast majority of comic book writers can never figure out the difference between a clip and a magazine, even after fans write letters that get published in the letters section explaining that they're getting it wrong? Yeah, I mean, gun mistakes. I did a whole video on the 10 stupid gun mistakes every writer makes, including me. I didn't leave myself out. I've made stupid gun mistakes. But the thing is that yeah, I'm always looking at the guns too. And are they using them right? That guy just fired 12 rounds from a 6-shooter. Why aren't they stopping to reload? Wouldn't they be changing the barrel out on that 50 caliber by now? So things like that. And or if a gun's not in the right period, but guy's firing a repeating rifle in the early 1800s, things like that bother me, and they don't bother average people who don't or aren't into firearms. They don't even notice it. But I notice it. Now, you could do a movie about a heart surgeon and get everything wrong, and I probably wouldn't know. I'm not a heart surgeon. I don't know anything about that. But everybody has a wheelhouse, and things annoy people. If that's your wheelhouse, and you see it always being gotten wrong. So let me explain this to any newbies out there. A clip is a collection of bullets that are literally in a metal clip that runs along the base or back or rear end of the bullet. And this clip is inserted usually from the top of the weapon, be it a Winchester 1895 or an M1 Garand from World War II. The bullets are inserted at the top of the action, and they're pushed down until they clip in place. Get it? And then when the last round is fired, the clip ejects from the rifle, and then you have to put another one in. So it's an open action, and it's an open clip. You can see the bullets. Now, a magazine is literally a magazine. The word magazine comes from French, like all of our military terms do, and it means an enclosure for ammunition. Thus, the magazine encloses the ammunition in it. You can't see the ammunition within it. It's basically a box that you insert in the weapon, be it a pistol, rifle, whatever. Even shotgun. There are shotguns that have magazines. And so you don't see the bullets. So clip, you can see the bullets. Magazines, you can't. And everybody makes this mistake. Every once in a while, I'll make a mistake because I saw something on the news and I just repeat it without thinking, because the news, our media, they don't know anything about firearms at all. So, um, but yeah, it is annoying, but we gotta forgive, because we don't want to be that know-it-all guy, or gal. Twin spin, of course. Here we go. Tochi again with, why do most comic book writers seem to think Kevlar is some kind of near indestructible tank armor that's light enough for a guy to wear over his chest, when in reality a Kevlar vest won't stop a knife or almost any rifle round? Yeah, I mean, Kevlar is one of those conveniences. It's like stories where a character gets knocked out so that when they wake up, the story has progressed without going over the boring parts. So, Kevlar is like this shortcut for writers who, just as they don't know about firearms, they don't know anything about ballistics either. And yeah, most rifle rounds will go through Kevlar. That's why our armed forces put a metal plate. There's a pocket for a metal plate in their body armor, in the front and in the back, to protect their heart. Because most bullet rounds will, or most rifle rounds will go through something like this. Now, police don't often run into people wielding rifles. So handgun ammo, Kevlar will do the job. But and even something like an AR-15 fires what is called a less than lethal round. I would imagine an AR-15 fired from enough distance, obviously point blank would be a different story, but fired from enough distance, I think Kevlar could deflect it or at least slow it down. Now, the thing about body armor is, I remember when Kevlar first came out, there were a number of newsmen, you can probably find these videos because they're hysterical. A number of newsmen decided they were going to demonstrate the Kevlar vest on camera on live TV by having somebody shoot them while they were wearing it. And so you see this idiotic reporter who doesn't have a thought in his head, just never thinks about consequences, and he's standing there like Superman, like that bull's just going to bounce off of him, ignoring the fact the incredible foot-pound pressure exerted by a bullet traveling at ballistic speed. You got this lead pellet traveling to you at like Mach 3, and you're just going to stand there. It's literally like getting hit by a truck. And in these videos over and over again, you can see these reporters getting knocked on their asses and shrieking in pain like a little girl because they didn't expect it was going to hurt. If you wear a Kevlar vest and you get shot with rounds from almost any kind of pistol, you can break a rib. You're going to possibly bruise your heart. You're going to be in a lot of pain. It's going to hurt, and it's going to knock you down. Especially if you're not expecting it. So yeah, I mean, Kevlar, clips, magazine, these are things that if you're going to write about this stuff, you need to learn more about it. I mean, if I was going to write about an atomic physicist, I would interview an atomic physicist. I would talk to them or try to read as much as I could. I did a Punisher story when I first started doing the Punisher story, in which it dealt with parachuting. And I went to a parachute school and talked to the instructor there to get all of the information I needed. This is before the internet. There was no easy way to find out about parachuting. You could buy magazines about parachuting, but they didn't get to the nitty gritty, and I needed the nitty gritty. I needed the terminology. I needed the length of time it takes to fall to earth depending on what height. What are those calculations? Things about weight and drag and all this other stuff that I learned. And from what I learned from this guy, I was able to write a story that a lot of parachuting vets wrote into the comic, asking me where I served and how many times I jumped out of a plane and where I learned to parachute. I've never jumped out of a plane in my life. I hope I never have to. But I learned enough to make it seem like I did. And that's what you got to do if you're going to write about guns. Go down to the gun range and not only fire some guns, talk to people. Talk to the people at the gun range. They'll be happy to talk, especially if they find out you're a writer. And they'll answer all your questions. because that's what they're there for. So here we go. Dan Battles. You've mentioned enjoying your Punisher Warzone run with JR. That's Johnny Romita Jr. to the rest of you. I know you like writing full script, but I believe JR is more of a Marvel style artist. Did you ever do to clash at all on the scripting, similar to when you were on Savage Sword with a different Marvel style artist? I can't remember that artist's name. Yeah, no, Johnny and I got along great on this because he made it clear from from Jump Street that he did not want to work full script, that he didn't do that. He worked plot, dialogue, Lee Kirby style. And I was fine with that because Johnny's a terrific storyteller. He was going to bring everything to the party this story needed. But in my discussions with him, I said, yeah, I'm fine with all of that. I said, my only problem with the Marvel style, and I've just talked about this in previous videos, so excuse me if I'm redundant. I said, the thing I don't like about the Marvel style is a lot of time the story loses its emotional weight because the artist is drawing whatever, and then it comes back to the writer who has to figure out what the hell are they saying to each other. And I said, there's no real flow. There's no setup and payoff because it just isn't possible. It just isn't possible. And I said, so I'm going to write you the plot. It's going to be rather detailed, but in the key scenes, interactions between characters, I'm going to write all the dialogue. I said, you space that out however you want. I said, you're the actor. Play the dialogue however you want, but I need you to know the emotional weight of each scene. And Johnny was completely down with that. He thought that was a great idea, and obviously it worked because this is my arc on Punisher with him is one of the most popular things I've ever worked on with you folks. So it obviously clicked, and he got it, and we worked great together. John, it was a terrific collaboration. Now the artist you're thinking about is Gary Quapis, and we really didn't lock horns or there was no animosity or anything like that. It's just I'd done a couple of Conan stories with Gary, and the same problem. The art comes, and I'm like, what? Conan is yelling. What the hell's he yelling? Of course, that inspired things like Crom Count the Dead and things like that. My signature Conan line. But I, once again, we're missing the emotional weight of the scenes, and I'm left too often. I mean, I can't set up jokes. I can't set up dramatic things. There's no natural flow to the dialogue. In exposition scenes, which I didn't have a lot of in Conan, but occasionally they were necessary. I wasn't either had too much room or too little room for that kind of thing. For Dr. Explaino to show up and catch the readers up on what's going on, or add resonance to what we've just seen by having an exchange between characters. And all these things are missing in the Marvel style because it's hard to put that stuff into an outline. And even if you did, would you get it across to the artist? So I said to Gary, I said, let me try full script one time. Gary was a little like, because he wasn't used to working that way. And he thought, okay, maybe Gary thought I'm going to take over the book and just tell him what to do all the time. And I'm going to be the big boss, and he's going to be the pencil monkey. I never wanted that. I never saw comic book writing that way. So we did a full script. And we're talking about a 50-page script, and Gary drew it. And at the end of it, he said, "You were right. You were right. This is better. The story is better now. The end result." When he saw it lettered and everything else, he realized this is a better end result. And he said that I had given him plenty of flexibility. That I didn't lock him in. I didn't tell him how to do everything. I told him what was important to the story, but I didn't tell him how to draw it. And we worked that way. And Gary is my most frequent comic book collaborator by far, and we worked that way together the rest of the time that we worked in comics. So there was no animosity from either guy. There was no conflict. I'm not a conflict kind of guy. I'm a let's all collaborate and let's hear everybody out, and everybody contributes. And people as talented as JR and Gary. I'm going to give them their leeway, and total respect, mad respect for both of those guys. And I just wanted a better comic at the end. It wasn't about my ego or anything else. I just wanted a better comic. Twin Spin! Dan Battles is back. What's your opinion on current comics overdoing the use of wingdings to cover swear words in comics? Personally, I can't stand it. I've stopped reading books where a writer overuses it. I can't blah blah blankety blankety stand it. They use them a lot. Don't they just use the actual words? I'm surprised with everything else they do in the comics that there's just not F-bombs being dropped everywhere in Batman and Spider-Man. I rarely use them. I remember back at Marvel, we were using them in the Punisher because the Punisher seemed more grounded in reality, more, I hate this word, gritty. And I was in the room where Tom DeFalco was complaining to Don Daly that we were using these things too much. And he said, everybody knows they stand for, and he said the F word and the S word. And Don said, well, they could stand for hell and damn, which were also banned from comics. So, but Tom just went right for the profanity. There's another funny Don and Tom story, but I'm not going to share it here. If you ever meet me at a convention, ask me. Love both those guys. Super, but Tom was, well, both those guys were a trip. Both. You ever meet somebody and it's just there's so much personality there, it's almost, it just lends itself to almost situation comedy moments. But anyway, I would use them mostly for comedic effect. I really didn't use them much in serious dialogue. Now you can go, somebody's going to go back and do a bunch of screenshots of me overusing whatever these are, these stand-ins, these wingdings, but they can be used to great comedic effect. It's one of my favorite comic book sequences of all time. It's from Asterix and Cleopatra, and it ends with Goscinny and others have did this a number of times, but it ends with this particularly colorful wingdings as this Egyptian vizier curses his luck. Another thing I want to say about this sequence is it takes a lot of guts to try slapstick in comics, but boy, this worked. I remember reading this. In fact, the first time I read this was in German, so I didn't quite understand all the dialogue. But this scene made me laugh out loud. I didn't see the block coming. It's such a Buster Keaton moment, and boy, that is expert storytelling right there. And then closing with the wingding. So you got like this, you get comedy's rule of three right here, people. Falls down the stairs, the block hits him, and then the almost hieroglyphic curse at the end. Hey, one more thing. A lot of you have been asking, this is, I guess, a frequently asked question about my next Conan book and when will it be out. And I know I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I can't expect you all to watch every video or to remember them after you watch them. But Caravan of the Damned, Siege of the Black Citadel are out of print. We received a cease and desist order at Castalia Books from the Conan estate. We could have argued that Conan is public domain, but that would have taken court time, and we probably would have lost in the end anyway. But the good folks at Titan are going to reprint these and the third book in new editions, but I have no information for you. I have still not talked to anybody at Titan. I'm dealing with dealing with them through a third party, and that third party has failed, no fault of his, to get the two of us together, get me together with Titan to find out what their plans are and how I might contribute. When Titan sent the cease and desist order and then negotiations followed by phone, it was all very convivial. People at Titan were wonderful. They said they liked my stuff, they loved my stuff, and they loved that I was contributing to Conan once again after a long absence, after all my work on Savage Sword, and they welcomed material from me. They just didn't want anybody else publishing it but them. and they will publish it. I'm just guessing. I guess they're going to publish all 3 novels in one volume because these are novellas. I wrote them to the same length that Howard wrote his novels, which is only like 35,000 words. So I would imagine they'll put these in a collected edition. If you have these paperbacks, you realize they're quite thin. So that's what I imagine, but I don't know. Maybe they'll print them on thicker paper in 3 different volumes with new covers. No clue. As soon as I know, you will know. I'll put out a special video. There's a promise I'm going to make. I'll try to keep. Hey, from the Rippaverse, we got a new one. And I will link to it in the below the video here. It's the Great War of Separation. It's going to be a 4-part miniseries by me and Jack Herbert. It goes back a generation of the Rippaverse. If you're a Rippaverse fan, you probably have questions. Why is this like this? And how did this guy be like this? And why is she doing that? Great War of Separation it goes back a generation to explain the history of the Rippaverse. Largely, it is a war story and espionage action adventure story, but with a lot of political intrigue of how Texas became an independent nation in the Rippaverse. What inciting incidences caused Texas to secede from the Union and stand alone on its own. It also presents a lot of your favorite Rippaverse characters a generation earlier. So you're going to see Isom as a child. You're going to see the origin of Brian Solari. You're going to see an explanation of how there are 2 different kinds of Excepts. You didn't know that, did you? So all the histories and mysteries of the Rippaverse are explored in this, as well as introducing a villain that you are just going to love. And some really staggering, earth-shattering events for Rippaverse fans. If you're a Rippaverse fan, this really is a must-have. You're going to want to know. This is like the time I discovered that first issue of Marvel Tales, the origins of all the characters, all the origins I had missed, all in one volume. So this serves much the same purpose. So there you go. Hey, if you want to contact me for whatever reason, you just get a hold of me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com is the most reliable way to reach me. That's it for this week, my friends. Thanks for the awesome questions, the many, many twin spins. I want to thank you for liking, subscribing, and spreading the word about this channel, and I will see all of you down the road.